Hello, everybody. Welcome to the American Solidarity Party. My name is Brandon Peebles. I'm going to be hosting this stream for tonight. I'm here with Jonathan Bruce, and he's going to be delivering a talk to us titled The City of God. What do we fight for? I'm Brandon Peebles, and I do a lot of video work and a lot of editing for the American Solidarity Party. And I'd like to pass it to Jonathan Bruce if you'd like to introduce yourself for those who may be unfamiliar with you.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Just want to start off with that. And for those that don't know, I ran for office actually as a Solidarity Party candidate back in the election in 2024. And it was an unconventional turn of events that brought me to the Solidarity Party. I've always been a lifelong Republican. Grew up doing political work for different local candidates, just around my hometown, just around the upstate. Did door knocking, do cold calls, and then I started seeing over the course of 2016 to 2020, parties change. People don't necessarily fulfill their promises. They compromise on the values that they talk about, and I had just had enough. I had had enough, and I wanted something that worked. I wanted something where, if I'm going to vote for this candidate, I want to be able to put my head on my pillow at night and sleep with a clean conscience, knowing that I did not I did not sell my soul. I did not compromise my values when I'm voting, when I'm in the ballot. And that kind of segues into what I'm talking about today. And it's about what we fight for. But also, for those that on the live stream, Facebook, on YouTube, for those that don't know, City of God is the title. What is the City of God? The City of God, also in Latin known as Civitas Dei, is a book made by none other than Saint Augustine. It's known as one of the best Christian apologetic books of all time. Has about 1,100 plus pages of Augustine's arguments to the Romans during the sack of Rome. And in this book, you see that the Romans are blaming Christianity for the fall of Rome. Augustine is saying, well, no, that's not true at all. In fact, you practice these same things that the barbarians did. Now, to start off, I want to read an excerpt from the first book that he wrote in the City of God. The glorious City of God is my theme in this work, which you, my dearest son, Marcellinus, suggested, in which is due to you by my promise. I have undertaken its defense against those who prefer their own gods to the founder of this city, a city surpassingly glorious, whether we view it as it still lives by faith in this fleeting course of time, and sojourns as a stranger in the midst of the ungodly, or as it shall dwell in the fixed stability of its eternal seat, which is now with patience, wait for, expecting until righteousness shall return unto judgment, and it obtain, by virtue of its excellence, final victory in peace. This work, a great work this, and an arduous, but God is my helper. These are the words that Augustine made whenever he was writing in contrast to what the Romans were saying. And now, in retrospect, the City of God is a people, a city that prioritizes a love for God rather than a love for self. And then there's the earthly city, the earth that we see all around us, the environment. At times, it is the fleshly city where we have a love of self where we give into our desires, where we want the most money, we want the most convenience in our life, whatever vices we may have, whatever legislation that lets us avoid responsibility. These are things that a lot of people, even myself at times, we fall into. And that trap, however, sadly, is sin. In First John, the scripture says anyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. And as we know, lawlessness is very serious crime in this country. Looking at the South Carolina statistics, though, we've seen that maybe there is a bright future for the state of South Carolina turning away from that lawlessness. From 2022, we've seen a 4.3% decrease in murder, a 4.1% decrease in aggravated assault, a 7.2% decrease in sexual battery, a 1.7% decrease in robbery per YFF4. We've seen an 8% decrease in burglary, a 4.9% decrease in theft and larceny. Only leading for increases is a 2% increase in motorcycle theft, a 3.7% increase in arson, and a 1.8% increase in reported weapon violations, which we already know weapon cases can be nuanced, which both Republicans and Democrats try to use for their own advantage. But now, these are just statistics on a paper. What about what's going on in Colombia? What about the legislature that's actually framing the way we live in our community? We've seen that back and forth, the South Carolina Supreme Court was struggling with the abortion 6-week ban. There was a total ban on the table, and it was rejected by 6 Republican women. And we saw that there was a lot of uproar between conservatives and liberals alike. For one, with conservatives, they saw the outrage in that people weren't as pro-life as they thought. And I like to relate this back to when the Romans, when being sacked by the barbarians, took on the guise of Christ and tried to save themselves, and then mourned when their godly temples were ruined. And here we see a stalemate for the Republican and Democratic Party, where you hear voters saying, I really don't know who I'm going to vote for. I'm voting for the lesser of two evils. I've been a straight ticket Republican or Democrat. That is why I pick my candidate. Well, obviously, this is what we give in social situations, but we know it's not true deep down. We know that deep down in the last election, that was an election that was pretty nasty. Even though for the first time in a while, we've seen a president have an assassination attempt done on him. However, he survived. And this great phenomenon kind of overshadows all of the other contradictions wrong with Trump's campaign. Then we see, in contrast to this 6-week abortion ban, we see the reproductive rights bill that was put on the table. However, we always see this opposition coming from committee every year. But one that really piqued my interest was the South Carolina Pro-Birth Accountability Act, which compensates women and compels them to carry pregnancies the whole 9 months in order to protect that life that is inside of the womb. Still sits on the Senate committee, and while we haven't seen it passed yet, this is where you bring charity into the equation. As a Roman Catholic myself, faith, hope, and charity, these are values that we stand for. And these are values that bring peace, love, and community. Now, with subsidiarity, that is a solidarian principle. However, we are still sitting on the fence with this as a state. How does that look to the family at home, or even the single mother at home, or single mother to be, who is pregnant, might not necessarily know how she's going to provide for this new life coming into the world? She doesn't want to do anything to it. But in the outside voice, the city of Earth, you see that this woman is being crowded and bombarded with things saying that they should end this baby's life, saying that it's not her responsibility to live her life as she pleases. However, we know as Christians, this goes against the will of God. So now I ask you, in the city of God, the end is to bring a love for God to the community, which then prepares us for our eternal citizenship in the kingdom of heaven. What do we fight for while we're in the city of earth? What do we fight for while we're here in this fleshly body? What do we fight for if we say we claim to have this citizenship of heaven? What's the point of it all? To that, I would give three phases. And just to give context, when I ran for office before, before when I was still a Protestant, before I converted to Catholicism, I had the intention that I was going to bring Christ to Colombia. I was going to bring Christ to the front door of the community, of the different doors that I door knocked at myself. Didn't have a team with me. And every time I saw, people would talk about God, but there was always the doubt that, yeah, this is what I believe, but nobody's going to do that. In this time, nobody's going to do that. We have the world that is bringing us lower and lower, a moral free fall. They had slight hope, but it was overcrowded by doubt. And that doubt led to self sabotage for their decision. Now, when I ran for office, I did not win. I was up against an incumbent who had money with the South Carolina GOP. And in consequence, was also fighting against the Republican Freedom Caucus at the time. And here I thought, I am bringing Christianity, the main religion of the Republican Party. I want to do things God's way. I want to do things the way the Lord intended for us to have our civic duty. Because a man ought to serve his country if he is a man of God. If he is a man of God and he does not provide his civic duty, if he does not provide his duty to the community, is he just a thief that just happened to board children? Is he just a slacker that is too prideful to contribute or give back? And I want to touch on this because there were specific individuals where I would reach out and I wanted to talk ideas. And while I was not competing with them, they were only looking at the shorter picture, saying that I must save up a specific amount of money in order for me to be serious. Yet, in every serious interaction, I was the one who talked to the constituents' outrage, and they stood there silent, damage controlling, which is a wound against justice. And in this wound against justice, we must know if you are going to run in a local election, why are you doing it? Are you like the politician that I just stated, where he's looking at a price tag? Or are you someone that actually carries ideals and wants to see change in this country? You see, with the call of God, it's not something that someone can necessarily resist. The only reason why you may feel the tension of running or not running is maybe because God allows it. To this I say, or Augustine would say, thus the earthly city, which does not live by faith, seeks an earthly peace, and the end it proposes, and the good things it desires to attain, is the peace of this present life. It makes war in order to attain peace. But the peace of the heavenly city is the perfectly ordered and harmonious enjoyment of God and of one another in God. Our end in politics should aim toward a community of peace and solidarity under God. Because if you have no God, you have no peace. And if you know God, you know peace. And now, to a lot of people viewing, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to hear this on Sunday. I'm going to hear this tomorrow. Why is this guy saying this now? Because when you know God, it reflects in all of your actions. When you know God, you know that He put that child in the womb. When you know God, you know that the Holy Spirit also exists, which convicts you to give to the needy, to give to the women and children, to the children and the widows, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. When you know God, it affects your every action. When you don't know God, it shows. And we can't execute this call of running to local office if we don't first submit to God's divine grace. if we do not cooperate with the grace of God, if we do not accept Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, we're just a person that has Christian as a name tag. And I know 5 other Christians down the road who also say they love God, but they could also be Muslim. What separates you from the Muslim that says he's on fire from God? What separates you from the Hindu who says he believes in God? Vivek Ramaswamy says he believes in God, but he doesn't say that Jesus is Lord. And it shows. You see, whenever you have the call of God and you accept it, and whenever you are able to use that wisdom to stand for what we believe, that is going to show. Who cares if you don't win? Who cares if you are persecuted for it? Jesus was he was flogged, he was whipped, he was he was crucified, right? So we know that with this, you need to examine yourself to see, okay, if I'm going to Columbia, if I'm going to be on the county council, if I'm going to be on the city council, if I'm going to be the solicitor of my community, am I doing this because I just want a paycheck? Am I doing this just to say that I'm a politician? Am I doing this because of me, or am I doing this because this is a mission that has been given to me? And what virtues are you going to make with that foundation? Once you know your why, what are your virtues going to be? Are they going to be faith, meaning that you raise the faith of your constituents to where they believe in you and they believe in God in the process that He put you there? Are you going to give them hope that that community can change for the better? As a congressman, are you going to give them hope that there's not going to be a transgender in the bathroom? Are you going to give them hope that they will have health insurance? In charity, are you going to give back to are you going to give back to your community? Are you going to be the hands and feet of Christ? And are you going to do that? Your authority is not your own, is what I'm getting at. When you are put in this position, it is not for you to fight for yourself. It is to fight for God, it is to submit to God, which means submitting to the governing authorities. Which then I also then talk to the people at home. We have to be subject to them, even when they aren't doing the best. I know that, to give an example, with Pope Francis, God rest his soul, he's in the kingdom now. The angels are rejoicing. And there were some things that many Catholics didn't quite agree with him on, right? But at the end of the day, God made him the vicar of Christ for a reason. And in government, Donald Trump was put in office for a reason. We don't know why, because we're not God, but his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts higher than our thoughts. And knowing that God knows what we don't know, he's going to sanctify us. He's going to set us apart whenever we are doing this. Now, with sanctification comes from the Greek root word hagismos, which means to be set apart. Now, in your hometown, people don't want to hear that Jesus stuff. People don't want to hear, oh, I'm Christian this, Christian that, because they're thinking in their mind, oh, well, people say they're Christian, but they're not. In fact, I know someone, when I was 13 years old, came to my middle school as a federal congressman and he was a smooth talker, he was charismatic, and he had a lot of people behind him. But then come to find out, last year, he fell into sin. And unfortunately, there was no honor there after that. With a truth speaker, God speaker, or a prophet, as Jesus has said when he went to Nazareth in Mark 6, prophet is without honor in his hometown. Which means that what separates you from the other candidates with similar values? You can't necessarily have your identity and then put a bunch of words on there. You need to be able to live out what you were talking about. My campaign slogan was the fight for life is now. And as a kid that was born in a single parent household who had to work two jobs while he was in college and dropped out twice, I was fighting for my life. But then I realized that I'm not fighting for my life just for me. I'm fighting for my life for the rest of the people around me, for people that might be going through a similar situation, and at the end of the day, they just don't know if they're going to be able to get through it. There may be people that don't know if they want to serve their country because of the different controversies we see with all of the wars and all of the rumors of wars. It is something that is very scary. I get scared sometimes. I have a fear of that. But we have to remember that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. For Augustine says, thus a man who lives according to God and not according to man ought to serve his country. Our civic duty is based on our sanctification, of God setting us apart. And when God sets us apart to run for office, he convicts us to acknowledge our dual citizenship, which is what I come back to. Not only are we citizens of South Carolina, or citizens of Virginia, or citizens of West Virginia, Ohio, whoever may be watching this live stream, we are citizens of heaven. And we're chasing God every day. When we know that we're citizens of heaven, we're not going to do things that only align with the citizens of earth, because then it goes against God. And as he says, civitas terrena goes for the love of self, even to the contempt of God. What makes us different than everyone else, every other country that doesn't have a strong base or a strong base of believers? Augustine even says, without justice, what are kingdoms but great bands of robbers? We need people in office to be able to call out evil. We need people in office to be able to call out outrages. We need people in office that are going to be able to speak against uncanny ways, ungodly ways that wicked people may use in government. That is when people say, why don't we have politicians holding other politicians accountable? It's because the love of God is not in the hearts of those who are supposed to, which is why a solidarian value, we go to the local level. We go to the local level in our communities. We stop idolizing the politicians that are at the federal level. While they are still crucial and why they still have a civic duty of their own, the real work is happening in our local elections. They're happening right around the corner in our mom and pop shops. They're happening at our churches. That is where everything is going on. And that is where the common good can be made. We have been sanctified. We are going to be sanctified. And we're already being sanctified. Where someone may see just more jobs being brought back, other people may see the bigger picture. Are families being healed? Is the family unit staying together? Are not only are we getting jobs, are we getting jobs with security to be able to build more families in this community? Because at the end of the day, God said, be fruitful and multiply. And being able to prioritize that goes hand in hand with the city of God. Which leads us to phase 3, the end of what every Christian should strive for in politics. And that is the city of God. Civitas Dei. And now I want to bring it back to a constitutional issue that, some Americans, people will go back and forth, but about church and state. We've always heard that separation of church and state is something that is very beneficial to the American people, where we have religious freedom, where we are able to worship whatever we want, where we are able to do whatever we want as a form of worship. However, whenever that's left unchecked, whenever we allow any type of religious freedom, we open ourselves up to the risk of harm. Not necessarily harm in a physical sense, but harm in other forms of life. And you have to see that religion and politics are not necessarily two different issues. In fact, they're actually one and the same. One and the same in the sense that religion keeps politics in check. Everybody has a belief system, everybody has a God they worship. It's just a matter of who thinks the other God is real. And 9 out of 10 times, they don't. But at the end of the day, out of the 4,000 different religions that are in the world, there is only one God. And that God is the foundation for our morality, for the environment around us, for our very lives as we know it. Anything that goes against this, anything that attempts to alter what has already been set out, is an offense to God. And might I add that with this godly city, even the earthly city shall pass away, but the words of Christ will never pass away, which is what urges us to be able to prioritize God's love for us in our communities. Whenever we whenever you see a criminal that is being put on death row, and we are saying that he is going to burn in hell for killing 20 children, right? He is a monster. However, he is a sinner, just like you, just like me. And to that extent, it is evil. But what would divine mercy be if that person didn't receive mercy either? Which is why we have to check ourselves. We have to examine ourselves whenever we are promoting justice. See, with euthanasia, with the death penalty, one person may say that person deserves to die. And that may very well be true. But on another hand, what if that person has a chance to change? What if that person has an opportunity? If they don't answer that opportunity, they'll answer to God alone for that, and they'll meet their demise. But if they do, there's somebody that was a Pharisee from the tribe of Benjamin with a similar story, who saw Christ, rejected him, was there when it all happened, when Christ was crucified. And then even after Christ descended, he still saw this as anger in his eye, with anger in his eyes. He would stone anybody that was still proclaiming Christ's name. He would murder, he would take his jacket off, go stone the Christians, then come back, put his jacket on. This person went by the name of Saul. And after a road to Damascus experience, literally, he was blind and heard the words, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Now, had Paul not accepted this opportunity and had not called out to Jesus, where would we be now? We wouldn't have the words of Christ unveiled by Paul to talk about the tradition, to talk about the letters of the church. We wouldn't have the letters that he sent to the different churches. We wouldn't have a huge part of the Bible for Christians, how to be able to emulate a Christian life. So then it goes back to, are we going to prioritize our love for unvigilant things? Because as vigilant as we feel that it may be, is it a godly thing to do? And if it's not, we are not prioritizing God's love. So then, what does that show for the newcomer that wants to go into politics, what do you fight for? Is right or wrong what you stand on? Will you stand on the truth, or will you stand on the lies that your flesh tells you? Will you fight for civitas de, or will you fight for civitas terrena? Thank you very much. And that's the end of my talk.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was awesome. We're now going to move into the Q&A portion of this stream. So if anybody in the chat has any questions, please submit your questions to the chat, and we will be going through them shortly. Uh, just to start off, I do have one question here that kind of made me chuckle. Serena wants to know, when are you going to be running for president?
Well, I'm 25 years old. So 10 years? 12 years? I'm not old enough yet. But maybe Trump changes that. Maybe he wants Barron to be his successor. And then I don't know. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But honestly, the presidency, it's something that I think it would be cool to like run for, but it's not something that I necessarily want. Just because, everybody wants power. Everybody wants to be able to do things with power, but nobody wants to be seen doing it, Because, like, once you're seen giving executive orders, once you're seen talking about this legislation and that, it's like you're in the eyes of the world now. And, you know, you have to be built for that. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not, but I'm saying that you have to be ready for the barrage of comments, the barrage of insults people are going to throw at you. I mean, think about it this way. Like, we are not God, but how many atheists, how many agnostics do you see a day just cursing God, blaspheming God? They are saying all these bad things. Now, if he wasn't God, he would just strike everybody down, right? Or if this was Old Testament, right? He would, because blasphemy is like punishable by death in the Old Testament. But that wouldn't be a loving God, right? It's like, for me, as if I were to be president, you have to understand that these are people that you're working for. They're not working for you, you're working for them. And I think that some people sometimes have that a little bit twisted because you are working for 380 million people. Not the, like, sure, they respect you when you walk in the room, but if anything, you should have the highest respect for them. So even if, for instance, let's say that it's a far left person that is mad at me talking about this policy, right? 9 times out of 10, they just don't understand. They just don't. And they might in due time, or they may never. And you cannot see, oh, there's this angry liberal yelling, saying all these lies, blah, blah. People do that when they're hurt. People do that when they get offended. You have to be able to look past that. And it's like, okay, is this person just here to just like talk crap, or do they have a genuine question? Or are they even trying to make it like a gotcha question, to their own like moral standard that usually ends up falling anyways. For instance, um there's a question on YouTube from a Timoteo Saldana Honesto. Quote from a priest: I've known these guys for 10 years. Unfortunately, they're not serious people. In 10 years, it's an absolute disgrace that they're not on every ballot in the country. Then one of two, they just don't make a serious effort to get in the ballot in each state. So they're not a viable third party. The last part of my quote. My question is, how can we show that we are a serious party? By getting more people to join the Solidarian Party and actually run. It starts by one person running, then another person running as a solidarian. But it also goes with actually doing the dirty work with politics. It actually starts with having that paper, getting the signatures, having events where you're doing community outreach. Um oh yeah, that's okay, yeah. That's the short that's the I see you put the second question to Mateo. Yeah. But it starts with door-to-door knocking, with calling people. You have to be able to do those things one by one if you want people to take you seriously. Like, yeah, you can have money around you, and yeah, you can see like, oh, we have this pack here, this pack there. But I hate to say it, Trump self-funded himself and he won. It was like what, 96% of him was self-funded and like 4% was like from PACs. I mean, it's different now, but back in 2016, Trump was at places. So I think being able to have more of a presence in the community and telling people that we actually exist, I think that's what's going to be the best course of action in order to show that we're a serious party. Nobody takes third party seriously because we don't even take ourselves seriously. I remember when Gary Johnson ran for president when I was a kid, and he said, "What is Aleppo?" It was a meme. He was emboldened as a meme. No one ever took him seriously again because just like that, you have to you have to understand a third party in politics is like the nice guy. Are you a genuinely kind guy or are you just a nice guy? And the public is like, it's a little bit more harsh, unfortunately, because you have Democrats and Republicans. They're like, "Oh, my daddy was a Democrat. My granddaddy was a Democrat," and then it's like other people just vote straight ticket, Republican regardless. So when that bipartisan system has been ingrained in the country for so long, you're kind of also gonna fight an uphill battle. But by doing the door knocking, by overclocking with political work and being able to be present as a solidarian in your community as much as you can, that is what's going to be shown as like being taken serious. Florida has done it, and I know that that's one of the fewer states that now has the American Solidarity Party on the ballot, but somebody went and they did the dirty work. It's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. And you have to and you also have to understand too that people are going to have their opinions about those third parties because there are multiple, and I mean multiple, third parties that say they're the Christian party, that say this is the party that's going to be the one. And we haven't seen that since Barry Goldwater. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I will say, like, just to kind of touch on that guy's question a little bit, is one of the things that he had brought up was like the ballot access, and he was quoting somebody who said that that the ASP is not making a serious enough effort to get on the ballot in each state. They're not a viable third party. And I would just say in response to that, like, if you do pay attention to what's been going on in the party, great efforts have been made to get us on the ballot in each state, and there has been a lot of success in doing so. You mentioned Florida earlier, and Florida is an excellent example. You can now register in the state of Florida to be an American Solidarity Party member, and we're not the only state. I'm in Florida, and we're not the only state that has that. There has been great efforts made all across the country to get us on the ballot, and they continue to fight for that every election cycle as well. So. Um, I think that we can prove that we are a viable third party by continuing to push for that, like Jonathan said. Um, let's see here. I do have a question for you, Jonathan, that I'd like to ask. Um, during your talk, you kind of talked about this concept of the city of God, or Saint Augustine's concept of the city of God, and that can be kind of a difficult. I don't want to say. I don't want to say nebulous, but it can be quite a difficult a theological concept for some people to grasp and understand. Um, do you see the American Solidarity Party as a vehicle for us to push for this concept of the city of God, or is it just like another tool? How do you see the American Solidarity Party playing a role in pushing for this city of God that you're discussing?
Well, we say that we're Christian democracy, so I would say it's more of a tool. Yeah, because I mean it's not scripture, like it's not authoritative. So I wouldn't expect somebody that hears about it to say like, oh well, like instantly they want to apply this theology to the Solidarity Party. I am saying that this is a clear cut idea of what we know from scripture, what we know from history, and what we know from God's nature. This is the end that we should push towards. I'm using City of God as a tool to push that, with subsidiarity, the City of God, while it doesn't reference that specific term, it's parallel to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. What would you say? You know, one of the things that we get some pushback on that's kind of a challenge whenever we get into these topics is, and you brought it up in your speech, is this whole separation of church and state idea. We do live in a country where not everybody is a Christian, and how would you say we could effectively fight for this city of God concept in a country where, frankly, not everybody is a Christian, and they're probably going to fight us on a lot of these political issues.
Well, there were many kingdoms where not everybody was a Christian. There have been many times in civilization where people were not Christians. It's just that now a lot of people are able to voice that opinion. You know, now we have the freedom where you're free not to believe anything at all, or you're free not to believe in Christ. And I would say that God's grace plays a lot of favor in that. If we're going to submit to God's grace when we're running for office, we need to be able to show grace to others. So sometimes they may not ever come to that conclusion to be a Christian, and maybe it takes others a longer process. You have to be okay with them. You have to be okay with the fact that they may not ever become Christian. But you need to be able to win their heart to show that these virtues work and these ideals are going to be beneficial for them in the future. Which is why I brought up a lot about civic duty. Like being a civilian and being able to serve your neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself. That means loving them unconditionally. And that means loving them enough to put in legislation to make change in the local at the local level that is beneficial to them overall. So it'll show, it'll show, and even if they never come to that conclusion that they want Christ, that they want the Eucharist, you have to be okay with that. However, you want them to be okay with the city that they're living in.
Yeah, one of the things I love about this party is that we really push for common good, common ground, common sense,
Right.
and it's like, to your point, uh, are we pushing for Christian politics? Yes, to an extent, but at the end of the day, these are things that are going to help you. They're going to benefit you, Christian or not. And I do like that we talk about that the even though we're pushing for these Christian values, or these values that we say stem from the Bible or Catholic social teaching, um, at the end of the day, these are things that are going to impact everybody in a beneficial way, and we can still get people to agree with us on these topics, even if they're not Christian. And we frequently do. We have a lot of common ground with both Republicans and Democrats on a number of issues. Um, and, we're pulling our values from scripture or from Catholic social teaching, and they're pulling their values from, other worldly things, but yet we still come to the same conclusions. And so I fully agree with what you're saying there. I have one comment here
I see that. Yeah, I see that.
from Scott. He's asking, does the American Solidarity Party support a U.S. constitutional amendment to get corporate money out of politics? I just to before I tee it off to you, Jonathan, I don't know how much we can speak to, um, the American Solidarity Party's specific platform on this very niche issue. I will say that I know that we are very much in favor of getting corporate money out of politics. That is on the party platform's website. I don't know about a constitutional amendment or anything, but I don't know if this is something you could speak to.
I mean, I just want to rehash that the Solidarity Party, we believe, are working at the local level.
Yeah.
So with this sounds like with I guess he's referring to lobbying with corporate money, or is he talking about corporate money in general?
It's not clear. I don't know exactly what he's referring to. I do know that the party, like on the website, the party's platform does mention getting corporate money out of politics, but I don't know the full extent to what.
I mean, I do. I mean, I do. I now this is a double-edged sword because what if there's some like a CEO that runs for president? That's his money, but that's also corporate money. Like a Donald Trump scenario. So then we're getting his money out. So then, well, actually, that would equal the playing field a little bit when you think about it. Because if you don't have corporate money in politics, you actually have to like go off of donations from small business from the community. In South Carolina, we have a lot of small towns. I live in Anderson, South Carolina, where like I want to say there will be like boat companies that'll support or endorse politicians, or there will be small businesses that do. And usually like if that specific place supports like ex politician, then that means it's a good rep for them socially. So I do see the good to taking corporate money out of politics, because then it actually requires people to be boots on the ground in the community, talking to people.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I do have one question for you that I'd like to ask. Um, you have experience running for office, and I just want to know, like, what are some of the key lessons and takeaways that you learned from your experience running for office?
If you don't have your out sorry, excuse me, let me drink some water for this.
No worries.
If you don't have your house in order, don't run. And I say that because running for office is a full-time job, whether you want it to be or not. It isn't just, oh, I'm running for office, and then you go to work the next day and you tell all your coworkers. That's not how it works. You are literally a nomad for the entire year, and you are going to different neighborhoods, you are going to different stores, you are going to different establishments, and you are talking to people. This is a full-time job. I want to get paid for this job. Right now it's a job that's unpaid. I want to get paid for it, but right now it's a full-time job where you have to always be on your P's and Q's. And some advice I would give is, when you have that mindset, then it's easier for you to talk to people on things. A lot of people, I believe, they run for office in response to like things that they disagree with for a specific candidate, but they don't necessarily run on the actual fundamentals that have been put in place for politics. When I first ran, I announced early. I announced in like November. And usually now, like if you're going to announce, you usually announce in like January or February, because for the Republican Party, the caucus was in June. So usually March to April, that's when they're going and leaving door hangers. That's when they're going around and door knocking, because it's closer, And there's an older demographic in Anderson, so when you're doing it closer to the caucus day, it's going to be easier for them to remember your name. So yeah, the advice I would give: politics is a full-time job, so you need to be able to be prepared to do said job.
Thank you. So it looks like right now at the moment we don't have any further questions. We do have some time left. So is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
Yeah. Just kind of, what my goal is within the American Solidarity Party. My goal is to not only spread the platform of Christian politics, but to also, show that diversity can be a thing in politics. Because right now we claim diversity in two parties. Either you're diverse in one party or you're diverse in another. Republicans have an obsession with putting a black face on everything. A lit a literal black face. What do I mean by that? I mean that there are token, if you're not a Thomas Sowell or, insert black influencer here, an Officer Tatum, then you're not one of them. But then it's like, what about Koreans? What about Indians? You know, and in the South, it is seen still as like a black and white issue. But then Democrats, in the same breath, will say they don't see color. And they're still racist, but just in a different way. They have a white savior complex where they think that it's like the girl saying, I can fix him. That's what it's like. But they're saying that based on your nationality and your race. And it's like, okay, this is the culture that we've grown up in. This is the culture that wants to divide us. And I think by pushing Christian politics, we start to see that people start to just naturally come away from that. Because in the kingdom of God, we won't have skin, you know? Like we have glorified bodies, according to Paul. So it's like while we've been put on this earth, you know, creation is beauty. There is beauty in our different cultures. And even though the Tower of Babel like separated our languages, I still believe that God made different cultures for everyone to enjoy together. Now, that's not an endorsement of multiculturalism. I'm not saying that either. But what I'm saying is that under one specific nation, people can enjoy their roots. They can enjoy where they come from, and they can still like live in solidarity as a result.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I think that's a good place to wrap up our conversation here. This was very informative, so I thank you for your time. I thank you for having you on to
Thanks
be
for
able to
having me.
talk about these things.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.